said, I'm Captain Bob. I'm the owner and the founder of Mariner's Learning System. We started in this industry in 2005. We were approved by the Coast Guard to teach online, the first school to teach that way. And post-COVID, we were the first school in the country to be approved to test online. Although I own the school, and surely I'd like you to take our programs and become involved with us. This is not a rah-rah Mariners type of a seminar. The idea is to give you good information, accurate information, so you can make a wise choice as to what that may be. That's completely up to you. Myself, I'm both a powerboater and a sailboater. I was very fortunate when I was 38. I sold another company for a fair amount of money. I was in Martha's Vineyard, and I met James Taylor, the famous singer. After an afternoon drinking with him, he invited me out on his brother's catamaran the next day, and I fell in love with the idea of sailing around the world. I took a weekend navigation course. I didn't want to be reckless, and had a boat built for me in France. Took the next 2.5 years and did just that, sailed around the world. During that sailing adventure, I was held against my will for 3 days in Morocco. I was nearly boarded by some pirates in the Med, and I also survived 50-foot plus seas. So I've got a lot of experience, and I'd like to share that experience with you. So we're going to begin now. So the topic here is earning your captain's license. We're going to be going through making sure that we have some sort of an semblance of an idea of what we're going to be doing. So the first thing we're going to go through is the who's and whys. We'll talk about who becomes captains, why they become captains. We're going to talk a little bit about some myths and fallacies and some opportunities that exist. Then we're going to speak generally about the different types of captain's licenses and endorsements that you can get. We're going to discuss the steps that are required to get your license, from your age and citizenship requirements down to the cost, how to submit it, timelines, things along those lines. And then we're going to discuss a little bit about the exam. We'll talk about the topics on the exam, the minimum score requirements, study tips, things like that. So let's begin. We have 500 people who are scheduled. We were tapped out at 500. That's how many people were in this seminar. So I'd like to thank everyone for the opportunity. So let's go on and see what we got. So let's talk a little bit about the types of people who want to become boat captains. We've been doing this stuff. We've got over 300,000 graduates by this point. We've been able to break this down. There's a lot of reasons why people get captain's license, but there's 4 or 5 categories that most people fall within. First off, some people want to make money. They want to turn their passion into a profit, and they want to turn this into a money-making endeavor. Then we have the recreational boaters who want to increase their seamanship skills or gain additional knowledge, and recognize the personal accomplishment of getting a captain's license. We also have a group of boaters who their family members are concerned about safety. Anyone who's been a boater for a while, they've been out on the water, there's things that they've seen that have scared them. So for those family members and the safety of their crew, that is another area of our what we call personas. And then we also have boat owners who want to try to take advantage of some of the tax write-offs that you can have, and also lower your insurance costs. With us, most of our students, although a number of our students are looking to get their captain's license because they want to earn some money with it. Primarily, our client is a recreational boater who's been on the water for a while, and they realize that there's more that they want to learn. That's a typical client for us. So let's talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that exist for commercial captains, and how do you get started into the industry. So one of the areas that I took advantage of right away was yacht deliveries. The cost of transporting a boat that is greater than 8 foot wide on land is very, very high, and very, very restrictive. My first year with my captain's license, I made $110,000 moving other people's boats around. Very lucrative, a great opportunity. The interesting thing there is that there are a number of delivery captains, but unfortunately, there's not a number that are reliable, and they do what they say when they say they're going to do it. So if you're choosing to come into this business and this is something that you're interested in, if you're reliable and if you're honorable with what the expectations you set up for the clients, you can expect to do very, very well in that end of the business. Fishing boats, it's a really common practice of becoming a charter boat captain or a head boat captain, or perhaps run a party boat. Great opportunities. One of the areas where I hear people all the time say is, well, I only have a 24-foot center console. All right, whether you have a 24-foot boat or you have a 60-foot boat, if you have a 24-foot boat or smaller, I would be doing very intimate fishing tours. I would be trying to include training, teaching people fishing techniques, not just putting a fishing pole in their hand. Very, very intimate. If I've got a larger boat, well, then I would be addressing the abilities of bringing more people out than the average guy. You can also become a water taxi. Water taxis, not only do you need to be able to run the boat, but you also need to be a great communicator. They're not the highest pay opportunities that are out there, but they're a great way of gaining some commercial experience. We talk about sea trials. Many boat brokers and dealers, they use licensed captains to conduct sea trials on behalf of potential buyers. So if I go to a boat show or if I'm trying to buy a boat, a lot of times I'm going to want to see that boat perform out on the water. Most of the companies I would be purchasing from, they would have a licensed captain who would be taking us out on that water to make sure that we're all safe. And then there's the instructor side. This is where I've made most of my money. Just to put this all in perspective, when I got my license, I've had it for 24 years now. My first year, as I said, I made $110,000 in the 20 plus years that I've had my license. Because of businesses that I've run and things that I've done, I've made more than $40 million with my captain's license. We just lost our screen. So there we go. We're back. So can you get this go the other way, please? Sorry about that. One more. So instructors, a lot of sailing schools are looking for instructors all the time, but powerboat instruction is becoming a really lucrative opportunity. I used to train people. I've done training both ways. I've trained people where I was doing 4-day liveaboard courses where you would come on my boat and we would go out for over a period of time of 4 days, and I would teach you how to use my radar, how to dock, how to anchor, all those different skills. But where I found the biggest opportunities was a lot of people who are retiring. In many cases, they purchase boats that are larger than what they're experienced running. They want to learn how to run their boats. So I would teach them how to run their boats. So those are just some of the common ways of getting licensed. There's a lot more ways. Some of the ways that we can get started in this, networking and word of mouth. All of the boat deliveries that I did, the first 5 years of deliveries, I never once put an ad out. It was all word of mouth. I had a habit of bringing a boat back in a better condition than when it left the dock. And what I would do with my boat deliveries is I would also make a list of things that need to be corrected within the boat. And if the owner wanted to pay me to manage that piece of the business, I would also go out and get people to come in and repair whatever was broken on that particular boat. And a lot of times with a new boat moving from the Northeast to Florida or vice versa, those new boats generally weren't in good shape because they weren't used and a lot of things would break on it. So that was a great opportunity for us. How do you get in the door? You can also work as a mate. So it's not uncommon for a fishing boat captain, a charter boat captain, a head boat captain. They need crew. Finding crew sometimes can be a difficult time. Even if you have your captain's license, it's really beneficial to gain additional experience on larger boats. So it's not at all uncommon for these vessels to be bringing you on. The trade is they'll give you time on their boat, but you don't get pay. Your pay is that time. Their pay for your time is you being on board their vessel. They also do this on dinner cruise boats. Some of the larger boats like that, they can do that. So you may have a captain's license, but you may want to get experience on a larger boat so you can get a higher license. And then we have a tip that says no matter which type of license you carry or how much experience you have, To a new employer, you're an unknown commodity. Most employers want to get to know you and their prospective captains over time before allowing captains' lives to, or passengers' lives to be placed underneath their command. So coming in and being willing to work as a mate, if you're any good, they're going to move you very, very quickly. If you're not, well, then it's not, you're not going to move up. So those are the opportunities that exist, and those are some ideas of where I can get started. We've been doing this stuff for so long, and there's a lot of myths and fallacies that you hear on the docks and talking to other people. So one of the first things with regards to getting your captain's license is the size of the boat has no impact on it. We get asked all the time, I just bought a 65-foot boat. What size license do I have? I bought a 34-foot boat. What size license do I have? The size of the boat has no impact on whether you do or do not need a license. A captain's license is required if you are charging a fee for being on that boat or receiving what the Coast Guard considers, what Coast Guard calls consideration. Consideration doesn't necessarily need to be money. Let's say that you own a villa on a golf course, and you have somebody that say, I'll tell you what, if you take me and my family out on your boat for a day, I'll give you a day at my golf course. In the Coast Guard's eyes, that is consideration. And if they're running that boat, they need to have a license. They have to be a licensed captain. The next one that we hear all the time is a license increases your legal responsibility. In the real world, the rules of road, rule number 2 tells you that 2 boats can never touch each other. It doesn't have a little asterisk that says, oh, and if you're a licensed captain, we really mean this. I'm an expert in the court systems as an expert witness with regards to the rules of the road. And I've been involved in multiple lawsuits where 2 out of these lawsuits, it was a he said, she said type of situation. And because the 2 of these people carried a license and they had logbooks and they had acted in an appropriate fashion as far as the eyes of the court were concerned, both those cases were decided against the other party, and it was solely because they had the captain's license. So that's not to say that you don't have legal responsibilities whether you do or do not have a captain's license, but they are not solely based on the fact that you do have a license. And then as I started this conversation, all financial compensation refers only to money. As I said, if you have a villa and you trade that out for time on the water, that is considered to be, in the Coast Guard's eyes, consideration or compensation, something you need to be careful of. So now we're going to move into the different types of captain's licenses. There's basically 2 different types of captain's licenses. The first one is called the OUPV 6-pack. The OUPV stands for Operator of Uninspected Passenger Vessels. It's also known as the 6-pack. The reason it's known as the 6-pack is because you can take 6 paying passengers out on the boat. A number of years ago, in fact, until 5 or 6 years ago, me as the owner of a school, if I called the Coast Guard and told them that I was speaking about the 6-pack license, they wouldn't be pleased by me doing so. I was always expected to be calling it an operator or uninspected passenger vessel. However, 4 or 5 years ago, the term 6-pack was just so popular that now even on the Coast Guard's National Maritime website, you will see the term 6-pack referred to a charter boat captain's license as well. The highest level license that you get is called a master's level license. With what we do, it comes in 3 versions, a 25, a 50, or a 100-ton license. It's all the same course. It's all the same program. The license will be issued to you based on the experience that you have. We're going to talk about each one of these things. We'll start with the 6-pack. We'll talk a little bit more about the 6-pack. So as I said a moment ago, the 6-pack allows you to take up to 6 paying passenger hire plus 1 crew member. It's good for vessels up to 100 gross tons. That's where the term 6-pack comes from. Now, something that we see often and frequently is, let's say that I'm running a charter and it's a 6-pack charter, and that's the license that I carry. And my morning charter shows up and there's 7 people. Some captains will tell that group that 6 of you are passengers and 1 of you, if the Coast Guard pulls us over, I'm going to tell them that you're our crew member. Well, that can work. However, and we'll talk about the requirements in a moment, but if you're a crew member of a licensed trip, then you need to be in a random drug testing program. So it's very unlikely that that seventh passenger is going to be in a recognized random drug testing program and has a random drug testing card on them. So if you find yourself in that position and you're at the dock and a seventh person shows up, either one of those people stays behind or the trip doesn't go. And I've been in that situation multiple times, and people think that I'm just being a jerk about the situation, but the Coast Guard's very, very specific. They'll pull my license and I could lose my business. So if you run into a situation like that, the Coast Guard, when they see a crew member, as long as that person is in a random drug testing program, they don't need any other, they don't need a safe boating certificate. They don't need to pass their captain's license or anything else like that. However, they do need to be in a random drug testing program. What is a six-pack boat? It's normally a recreational vessel. That's why they call it an uninspected passenger vessel that can engage in charter fishing, scuba diving, or cruises. These are a couple images of the different opportunities. There's one more thing that is important with the six-pack. There's something called the Jones Act. And the Jones Act is something that restricts your ability of running foreign-made vessels where the keel of the vessel was laid outside of the United States. If you've got a boat that was not manufactured in the United States, you're going to have to look into the Jones Act and an exception for the Jones Act if you plan on doing charters or you plan on teaching or anything else like that with this particular boat. Just be aware it's called the Jones Act. If you have any questions about the Jones Act, my boat was made in France. I didn't know anything about the Jones Act until I tried to get it registered for charters in the United States. And that's when I found out that there were some other restrictions and requirements. There is a path to get past the Jones Act, but it's something that you should be aware of. So if you've got a foreign-made vessel, you need to be aware that there's going to be some limitations to your ability of using that commercially in the United States. So the six-pack is issued in a couple different forms. The first one is considered to be an inland license, which allows you to operate commercially on bays, sounds, rivers, and lakes. That's called an inland license. The near coastal license allows you to operate on inland waterways, and in addition to that, it will allow you to operate on vessels up to 100 miles offshore. That's called a near coastal license. And then there's a Great Lakes and near coastal. And the Great Lakes near coastal allows you to operate on inland waterways, near coastal waterways, as well as operating on the Great Lakes. Now, the interesting thing about the Great Lakes is in the Coast Guard's eyes, a day operating on the coast on the Great Lakes is equal to a day operating in the ocean, whether you're on the East Coast or the West Coast. So we'll talk about sea service requirements, but time on the Great Lakes counts as if it was time done on an ocean. So let's talk a little bit about the master's license now. The master's license is the highest license that you can obtain, and it allows you to perform the duties of a six-pack captain, but also allows you to operate what they call inspected passenger vessels. An inspected passenger vessel has something that's called a COI, a certificate of inspection. It's been built to very, very rigid Coast Guard standards. And this COI, the certificate of inspection, will tell you how many passengers you can have on the boat, what routes you can run, how many crew members you have, what type of safety equipment. So it's a big deal to have that. So if I'm a licensed master, again, that's the highest level license that I can obtain. And those are on what we call inspected passenger vessels. A master license is issued for operation of the Great Lakes, inland waters, and also near coastal waters. The main difference with the near coastal waters is the six-pack is good for 100 miles offshore. The Masters is good for 200 miles offshore. The Masters comes in 3 different versions. There's a 25, a 50, or 100 ton Masters license. With the Mariners Learning System, it's all the same course, it's all the same program, it's all the same final exam. The license will be issued based on the size boat and the type of experience that you have prior to getting your license. Both the amount of sea service time and the size vessel will influence the license that you're eligible for at the master's level. Here's just a couple examples of master level licenses and those operations. Whale watching boats. Most whale watching boats are taking out more than 6 paying passengers, so that would require a master's license. If you go to the islands or if you go to many of the resorts, their dive boats have 12, 15, 20 people on board. That would be an example. A ferry boat is another one, or a harbor tour boat. Those are, and sailing schooners as well. So those are all examples of inspected passenger vessels that all have those certificate of inspections. So in the Coast Guard's world, you're not required to start with a 6-pack. You're not required to advance through the different licenses one at a time. If you meet the Coast Guard requirements for 100-ton masters, that's a license that you'll get right out of the gate. So we're asked all the time, do I need to start with the 6-pack and then go to a 25, a 50, or 100-ton, or can I go directly for a master's license? If you start with a 6-pack, you can upgrade to a master's level license, or if you've got the time and experience, you can go directly to a master's level license without first holding a 6-pack or holding any other license at all. With the 6-pack and the master's license, there's a couple different endorsements that you can get and place on these licenses. So the first one is called a towing endorsement. The towing endorsement can be issued for both a 6-pack or a master's license. And it will allow you to assist vessels for a fee. So there's a difference between a towing endorsement and a license to run a tugboat. So a towing endorsement is kind of like the AAA out on the waters. You run out of fuel, you've run aground, your engine's broke. You'll see examples of Boat US, Towboat US. Those are a couple examples of captains who have a towing endorsement on their license. The towing endorsement, again, can be placed on both a 6-pack or a master's level license. And it is a requirement if you want to commercially assist other vessels that may be aground, disabled, or out of fuel, or they're experiencing some other malfunction. It's the endorsement that would be required for that. The next level license endorsement is a sailing endorsement. Now, the 6-pack is good for both power and sail. So whether I'm a sailor or a power boater, it doesn't matter with the 6-pack level. That's good for both power and sail. However, if I am a sailor and I want to take more than 6 paying passengers out on an inspected vessel, then I would need to have a sailing endorsement. Licensed masters may also be endorsed for a sail or auxiliary sailing as appropriate. This endorsement authorizes the holder to operate inspected sail and auxiliary sailing vessels within the scope and limitations of their license. So the 6-pack is good for both power and sail. The masters can only have a sailing endorsement applied to it. The 6-pack can get both the towing and the sailing endorsement. Let me ask Sammy if we've got any questions that I need to get to, or are we all up to date?
Can they claim time on recreational vessels, like their own boat? Sure.
So the question is, can you claim time on recreational vessels as if it's your own boat? Yes, 90% of people's time is done on their own vessels. Now, the interesting thing with the time on the water, and we'll go into it a little bit deeper, but if it's your boat, you can sign off your own time. If it was friends or family's boats, they can sign that time off for you. But the time can be done on a recreational vessel. It does not need to be on a commercial vessel. It does not need to be on a vessel with passengers. It does not need to be in, you can be the sole person on board that boat, and that time can be counted.
Does the 6-pack cover sailing charters?
So the question is, does the 6-pack cover sailing charters? Yes, as long as you're taking less than 7 paying passengers and 1 crew member out on the boat. Most of the schools, most of the people who are running sailing charters, especially if it's off their own personal boat, they have 6-pack licenses. So a 6-pack license is good for both power and sail, and you can run sailing charters off of a 6-pack, as well as instruction with a six-pack as well.
For the boating requirement, does their time need to be on only one body of water, or can they use time on multiple bodies of water?
So the question is, if I'm going for a license, can my time be on one body of water, or does it need to be on multiple bodies of water? So it can be on one body of water, or it can be on multiple bodies of water, and it can be on multiple boats. One of the things, we're in the Northeast, so one of the things that the Coast Guard talks about is the difference between inland license or near coastal license. And there's something that's called the boundary line. It's a fictitious line that's not out in the water. You can find it on a chart. But the boundary line is the difference between where the international rules and the inland rules of the road take place. And that is what the Coast Guard uses as an example, or as their borders for whether you're going to get an inland or near coastal license. So if you're on the East Coast and you're on Long Island Sound, which is an area where we have a lot of our boaters, and I promise you, if you've never been on the Long Island Sound, it's as bad on certain days as any ocean I've ever been in. If you are on the, if you took a line from Montauk and you drew it to Block Island, and then you drew a line over to Newport, everything shoreward of that would be considered to be inland waters. Anyone seaward of that would be considered to be international waters. The same thing is true for the Chesapeake Bay. So the Chesapeake Bay, all of that time is considered to be on inland waters, and I promise you the Chesapeake is a pretty large body of water that can also get rough as well. So we have some clients, so in Long Island, I hear clients frequently say, well, I want a near coastal license. Well, if all your time is on inland waters, what does it matter? That's where you're operating. So it really doesn't matter if that's where your time is. And if you're a sailor and you sail on the Chesapeake, it's a long ways. It's a day either direction to get to the ocean at very least, depending on the conditions. So generally, most people will get the license that is appropriate for their area. Any other questions?
Last question, what if I have time on international waters?
So the question is, what if I have time on international waters? When I got my license, most of my time was spent cruising around the world. So time on international waters counts as well. Again, if it's your boat, you can sign off your own time. If it was friends or family's boats, they can sign that time off for you. If you were in the BVI and you're a sailor and you chartered a boat from the moorings or one of those organizations, then you would be required to have them fill out your sea service form or give you a letter stating that you were on this size boat, you operated, and this was the period of time that you operated it for. So let's move forward and see what else we've got coming up. So let's talk about some of the steps to get your captain's license. So there's several steps in getting your license. I've just broken them down to 4 sequences. So the first thing is to accrue and document your experience on the water. We'll go into that a little bit deeper in just a moment. The second is taking an approved captain's license course and exam. You can do this on your own. You're not required to take a captain's license course, but I can tell you whether you take our program or you choose to go elsewhere, that would be the path that I would recommend. I don't know anyone who knows this stuff much better than me. Not a great claim to fame, just an end result of what I do every day and I've done for 23 plus years. If I were to go take the Coast Guard's exam for getting my captain's license, if I failed it twice, I wouldn't be disappointed. They have a database of questions that have questions that, in my opinion, are not relative. They ask about topics like Loran, which was a navigational system that has been discontinued for more than 10 years. If questions like that came up on my exam, I would be prepared to answer them because I haven't used those systems in years. So again, whether you choose to use Mariner's Learning System or you choose to go elsewhere to get your captain's license, we have active duty Coast Guardsmen who take our courses all the time because they're aware of just how difficult that test can be. That's not negating the difficult nature of a licensed school, but we control the content. In our case, we also control the test. We wrote this course, we wrote the exam. We don't charge a fee for the test. So it's in our best interest to make sure that you're well prepared as you're going through the process. Then the third step, once you've got the time on the water, you're nearly got the time on the water, you've taken the course. Now we recommend that once you complete the course, Now you start accumulating your Coast Guard requirements, or you're nearly done with the course. And then finally, you're going to go through the application. So what I'm going to do now is just break down these steps one by one and try to give you some additional insight onto these. So the first thing for documenting your boating experience, for whether you're getting a 6-pack or you're getting a master's, the minimum amount of time or the minimum amount of boating experience that you're required to have is 360 days since you were 16 years old. 90 of those days need to be done within the last 3 years. The Coast Guard calls that recency. Now, on this particular screen, there's an image of what the Coast Guard would call a sea service form. The way the sea service form works is got 5 columns, and each column is a month. So if I was doing my sea service form now, June of '99 I was on my boat 5 days, June 2000 I was on my boat 8 days, June 2001 I was on my boat 6 days. Do I know that to be factual? No. If I owned a boat during that period of time, close enough for these purposes. So you don't need to have an exact logbook of exactly where you were on what day, how many hours you were out on the water, who was on the boat with you, or things like that. So the sea service form is, you want to be accurate as you possibly can, but it basically boils down, in my view, as a best guess. You can also have letters from employers, and you can also get letters from other boat owners who you've served on their boat or run boats with them. But the easiest way of doing it is with a sea service form. So again, that's a minimum 360 days on the water. 4 hours counts as a day on the water. In one 24-hour period of time, I can claim just 1 day. So if I go out for 8 hours, that is only 1 day on the water, as long as those 24 hours were within the same calendar day. If I went out at 8 o'clock at night and I didn't come back until 4 o'clock in the morning the next day, that would be considered to be 2 days. Now, if you operate commercially and you're a mate or you're somebody on board a boat, the Coast Guard will, if you are running 12 on, 12 off shifts, 12 hours on, 12 hours off, the Coast Guard may give you a day and a half worth of experience for each one of those days that you were running on the shift. It depends on what your duties were, what your responsibilities were, and there's some other things, but just be aware that that is also an option, not generally on a recreational boat, but if you are in a commercial operation where you're serving as a crew member on board a boat, 12 hours on the water can count as a day and a half. So the second step, once we've got the time, we talk a little bit about taking a Coast Guard approved course. Mariners, we offer a suite that are approved by the Coast Guard. These are structured for people who are both looking for a career in the commercial boating operations or for recreational boaters wishing to increase their knowledge. The way that it works with our program is, once you complete our course and pass our exam, we'll give you a certificate of completion that you submit with your application to the Coast Guard, and upon the review and approval, they will issue the license. Some people will think that the paperwork is more complex and complicated than actually taking the course. I wouldn't argue with them over that. If you lean on us, we have processes that we'll talk about. We'll talk about the application sitting in the paper in a moment. We have processes in place to make sure that it is as smooth and easy as humanly possible with what we do. So again, with our programs, Mariners is unique in that not only do we write the course, we also wrote the final exam. Many schools within our industry, they charge a fee for their test. We do not charge a fee for the exam. The Coast Guard doesn't charge me for testing you, so I don't charge you a fee for that test. I don't do that for a couple reasons. Number one, for a few reasons actually. One, I think that if you're taking the course because you want to pass an exam, if I charge you 2 different fees, for me, that's a little bit bait and switch. Number two, if I charge you a fee for taking the exam, that means that testing is a profit center for me. As a business owner, if something is built out as a profit center, I may not want you to pass the very first try. I might want you to come and test a couple more times to give me some more money. So we don't do it for that reason. And finally, and the most important to me, is I want you to know that I'm as financially invested in your success as you are. Anyone who doesn't pass their exam, it costs me money as a business owner to retest them. I have to pay my proctors. It costs me materials. If it's chart plotting, I have to send materials out for you to test and things like that. So it's an equal thing. I want you to be as successful as you want to be. There will never be a misunderstanding of what my motive is. I'm not looking to trick you. It's really important in my world. Just a quick story. I got my license. I went to a very well-known school, and when I went to that particular school, it was a classroom setting. They were basically teaching us the answers to the exam. And I got to tell you the truth, I didn't mind so much knowing what questions were going to be coming my way. But every time I raised my hand and asked them a question, why is this the right answer? They every time they said, shut up and sit down. If you answer this differently than what we told you, you're going to get the question wrong. Now, again, my problem wasn't with what the right answer was. My problem was I didn't understand why it was the right answer. So I went through this whole program, and I was working hard. School was never kind to me when I was younger, and I was working hard. Most people knew me as a success now. I had sold a company for a fair amount of money. No one realized my educational background was a little bit scattered when I was younger. So I didn't want to fail this thing. And come the day of my test, I show up for my test, and I'm jacked up. I know that I've been primed with what most of the questions are, but still, I didn't have confidence, and went there, and the proctor said it's $95 for the exam. So, well, I paid for the course, and they said, exactly, but you didn't pay for the test. They wanted that $95. I tried to give the guy a credit card, and he said, no, it's got to be cash. So I'm in a town that I'm unfamiliar with. I have to go find a Mac machine, a bank machine. So 20 minutes later, I come back. I have $100. I give it to him, and he takes the money and puts it in his top pocket and says he didn't have the $5 change. It was at that moment that I decided that I was coming into this industry, and I was going to do things differently. I came up with this idea. How about if you pay me for an education, I actually provide it for you? So that's really the foundation of what Maritime School was built on. I know this card slide says 200, but we're over 300,000 graduates now, and we're growing every day. There's at least 15,000 people right now as we speak who are enrolled in our programs. So that's how we do it. That's my last rah, Mariners Learning System. We'll just move on. So now let's talk about some of the Coast Guard requirements getting a license. You need to be 18 years old for the OUPV 6-pack license, 19 to become a licensed master. Now, the way that it works with our approval in the Coast Guard is once you begin our program, you have a year to complete the course. And once you complete the course, you have an additional year to meet the requirements of the Coast Guard. So one, it's not uncommon for somebody to start our program before they have all the necessary time on the water. And it's not uncommon for somebody who's 17 to take our course and on their 18th birthday get their license. So for the 6-pack, you need to be 18. For the masters, you need to be 19. For the 6-pack, you need to be have a green card. You do not need to be a resident. You need to have a resident alien card or a green card, or you can be a U.S. citizen. For the master's level license, you need to be a U.S. citizen. Along with the time on the water and the age, now they're going to do a background check. There's something called a TWIC card, which stands for Transportation Worker Identification Credential. And the TWIC card was put in play 12, maybe 15 years ago now. It's a biometric strip that they will take fingerprints and they will do a background check. When I got my license, the Coast Guard did those background checks themselves. Now it's all done through TSA with a TWIC card. The TWIC card is not the same thing as your quick pass through the gates at the airports. It's done by the same people, but the TWIC card is something different. And it is a requirement of getting a captain's license. Then we're going to have to pass a drug test. Marijuana, cocaine, amphetamines, opioids, and PCP. These are the 5 things that they're going to be testing you for. It needs to be a DOT approved drug test. Now, something that has become a problem for some is I happen to live in a state where recreational marijuana is approved by the state, but this is a federal license. So just because the state of wherever you live allows you to partake and smoke or do edibles, that doesn't mean that it's legal with your captain's license. So if you smoke pot, you're going to fail the drug test, regardless of whether it's okay with the state or not, because at least at this moment in time, the federal government has a problem with that. So the drug test is important. Some of the people have told me it was the hardest test they had to study for. So that's that on drug testing. Next, you're going to have to pass a physical examination, which includes a hearing test. There's going to be a vision test, and there's going to be a review of your medical history. It's fairly comprehensive, but it's certainly not something that, if you're in fair shape, that is going to be that difficult to pass. I know I've had a client who had a heart replaced who was able to get their captain's license. So in my world, that's a pretty big operation, but he was able to still pass the physical examination and get their license. Part of the physical is an eye examination. Part of that eye examination is going to be a color blindness test. So I'm partially colorblind to red and green. There's about 20% of adult males. It's something that's only found, my belief is it's found only in males. So when you give me these circles, I can't see the right numbers. Other people can see the numbers jumping off the page. The numbers I see are the ones that I'm going to see if I'm color deficient in red and green. So there's something called the Farnsworth lantern test. If you are color deficient, as I am, the Farnsworth lantern test is an old test where they put 3 lights in it. They move the lights around. You have to be able to see the green light, the red light, and I think it's a yellow light. And you've got to be able to see and tell the order in which they're in. If you can see those order, you can pass it. That happens to be a test that I can pass. I can't pass these circles. Now, if you're stone cold colorblind, you can't see colors. You see black and white. That's not a disqualifier upon itself. All that would happen is you would have a limitation placed on your license that you cannot operate professionally or commercially from sunset to sunrise. So that doesn't mean you can't operate the boat at nighttime recreationally or for pleasure with your family on it. It just means that if you are a licensed captain and you cannot pass a colorblind test, then you're not going to be legally able to run charters from sunset to sunrise. And most fishing charters and most teaching environments, they're all during the daytime anyways. So most people who have this problem, it's not something that's going to really get in their way of using their license. But again, if you only see black and white, you can still get your license. It will just have a restriction placed on it. So let's talk a little bit about some of the medical conditions that may cause a delay or your license to be rejected. So a cardiac disease. So a cardiologist needs to certify that you're in good health and that you've not had any episodes within the last 18 months. So let's say that I had a problem with my heart and I had a stent put in my heart. So I would need to go 18 months without having anyone else tinkering around inside my heart. I would need to get my cardiologist to sign me off. And if the Coast Guard, based on your medical history, has any additional concerns, they may require that you take a stress test. Again, that's a case by case, but just because you've had cardiac disease or you've had a stint or somebody maybe had a bypass, that is not a disqualifier on its own, as long as you can get a cardiologist to say that you're cool, that in the last 18 months you haven't had anyone tinkering with you. And if it's been a bypass or something, for sure, they're going to want to do a stress test. If it was just a stint, they may not want the stress test. Another disqualifier is being a diabetic. The key with diabetes, as long as your A1C is below 8 and your condition is well managed, you're good to go. So that if you're taking medication to keep your A1C below 8, and if it's over 8, you're taking medication, you're aware of it probably, as long as you're going to a doctor. As long as it's well managed and you can get that number below 8, diabetes is not a disqualifier. The Coast Guard is afraid that you're going to go into insulin shock. This is why they put this requirement there. Any psychiatric disorders, I think that speaks for itself. Sleep apnea is another one that can become an issue. So if your sleep apnea is controlled and managed and your doctor will say that everything's good and you're fit to operate a vessel, not a disqualifier. Depending on the severity of your condition, the Coast Guard may require a sleep study to make sure that your condition doesn't impact your ability to perform your duties. They don't want you to fall asleep while you're running or things like that. And then if you have a drug problem or you chronically use narcotics, that's an issue. So there was a period of time when I had a really bad back condition and I was taking Percocet, although it was prescribed to me and it was 100% legal. During that period of time while I was taking that medication, I was not able to operate. I didn't lose my license, but I wasn't able to use my license commercially while I was being treated for that condition. So those are the primary. There are other conditions that can have an impact on it, but for the most part, these are the five biggies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the five biggies that we see all the time. The Coast Guard is going to require that you get an adult CPR and basic first aid card. We generally recommend the American Heart Association or the American Red Cross. Those are two fine places to get your license. There's plenty of other places to get it. Before I took somebody else's course, I would make sure that I contacted National Maritime Center and made sure that their course is approved for the Coast Guard and that they'll recognize it. Also, although our courses and exams are approved by the Coast Guard to teach online, the Coast Guard to date and to my awareness has not approved any online courses. So for the CPR portion and the basic first aid, expect to go in. It's a 4-hour class. Many community hospitals do it for free. If you have to pay for it, it should cost you 50 or 60 bucks. Don't pay any more than that. Some of the programs will have, so you need adult CPR and basic first aid. Some of the courses will offer AED or some elevated levels, infants, things like this. As long as that card contains at least the adult CPR and basic first aid, anything above and beyond that is fine, no problem at all. But you need to make sure that you have the adult CPR and basic first aid, and and it has to be issued within 1 year of you applying for your license. And then you can have the written requirement. We talked about this a little bit before with Mariner's Learning System. We're approved to test online. It's literally a 24/7 type of a situation. It doesn't matter to us whether it's a holiday, a vacation, or where you are, as long as you have access to a desktop or a laptop, you have a high-speed internet connection, you have a camera, and you have a microphone on your computer in a quiet area, then you're good to go. As I said earlier, once you complete our course and pass our test, we'll provide you with a certificate of completion. You take this certificate of completion with your application. You're going to scan it. In the old days, you used to have to mail it in. In today's world, you're going to scan it and you're going to email it to the Coast Guard directly. And then upon their review and approval, they will issue the license to you directly. When you're applying for this license, there's a $145 fee to submit this. As I just said, you're going to email this in. We provide you with all the instructions, what you need to do, and effective guidance. Just to try to bring things together so that you understand all the costs that are associated with getting your captain's license. This is just a general guideline. Some people spend a couple dollars more, some people spend a little bit less, but this is a pretty good idea of the investment that you're going to have to make it get your license. So if your insurance doesn't cover your physical examination, you can expect to pay up to $200 or so for a DOT physical examination. This would be the same physical examination that the truck drivers take. So it's not that difficult to find, but it's a DOT physical examination. We'll provide you with the paperwork and directions. And as I said, if you have to pay for it, you can expect to pay upwards of $200. You're going to need to do the drug test. If you're a police officer or if you're in some sort of a job that they do random drug testing on you, If you get a letter from your company that says that you have not refused a drug test or failed a drug test, the Coast Guard will recognize that as long as DOT approved drug test and you're in a random drug testing program. If you are not, it'll cost you $75 to $95 to get the required drug test. The TWIC card, again, that's your background check. That's through TSA. That's $125. The basic first aid and adult CPR, as we were saying, if you have to pay, $65 would be the top that I would ever pay. Many of the community hospitals, fire departments, they do it for free. So look around, you'll probably be able to find something in your neighborhood, and they run them all the time. The application fee itself, you'll pay $100 for the application and $45 for the Coast Guard to issue license to you. So that's done through go.gov, and that's $145. And then the boating experience and that documentation, you fill it out yourself. There's no additional cost for doing any of that sort of stuff. So for a six-pack, our master's license, you're talking anywhere between $800 and $1,200 out the door, ready to go. Again, some people can pay a little bit more. That's including your course and all the different requirements. If you go through us, you certainly can spend more than that if you choose to, but you're not going to get any additional value for the additional money that you spend. When you submit the application, the Coast Guard is going to be reviewing it. They're going to make sure that you've done the TWIC card, that they're going to check your proof of citizenship. If you are going for a master's license, they're going to make sure that you're a U.S. citizen. If the six-pack, they're going to make sure that you've got a green card, you're an approved permanent resident. They're going to check your medical experience, your boating experience, your training, and they're going to make sure that you get the certificate from us. If you follow the process that we ask, your application won't be any more delayed than whatever their backlog happens to be. But there's basically two piles of paper. You want to be in the pile of paper that doesn't have any issues, not the pile of paper that needs to be addressed with additional updates. And then on this part, we partnered with a company called MMCs. They have licensed software and they have experienced people who man the phones. I don't partner with a lot of companies. In fact, it's the only company that I've ever partnered with. And if you go with Mariner's Learning System, they have a pro version that is $95 a year. We offer you 2 years access, and it doesn't cost you any fees for it. So you don't have to pay MMCs. That's all part of our program. There's no additional fees for that. And this is a great resource because they will provide you with the forms. They have an app to make sure that you filled out the forms properly. If there's any questions, you can pick up the phone and speak to somebody. If you need to do a webinar with somebody, speak live with somebody, that's available as well. And again, one of the advantages of going through Mariner's Learning System is this is an expense that we bear for you, and it's a service that MMCs is excellent at doing. They're the best at what they do. So let's talk about the timeline and some of the cost considerations for the completion. Because our courses are self-paced, depending on the six-pack is 25 to 35 hours. It's designed to be a 60-hour program, but we're finding most of our students getting through in 25 to 30 hours. The master's is designed as an 80-hour course. It's taken 55 to 60 hours for the average student. Again, we've had students finish in 3 days. We've had people take 3 weeks. We had people take 3 months. How you split the time up is up to you, but these are fair times. Some people do it a little faster. Some people do it a little bit slower, but those are fair times for an expectation. Then the Coast Guard, once you send your application in, it's taking the Coast Guard anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks. We've seen it go as far as 90 days. In the old days, like when I got my license, it could be 5 or 6 months before it was issued. So 90 days, although it might not fit into your time schedule, it's really not that bad in comparison to what it once was. But you can expect that as long as your application is filled out properly, if you use MMCs, as we recommend, as part of your program, you can expect the Coast Guard to issue your credentials in 4 to 6 weeks as long as everything is correct. So as I said before, your total investment, you should expect $850 for like a six-pack. The master's, $1,100-$1,200 just because the course costs a little bit more money. So that's that piece. What kind of questions might we have?
Somebody wants to know about if they have hearing aids.
Yeah, so hearing aids and hearing is a case-by-case basis. Having hearing aids is not a disqualifier on its own. If you reach out to us, we'll provide you with the medical certification process and the application, and it's got more specific information on that. I have problem hearing. I don't have hearing aids, but I served on an aircraft carrier in the Navy, and my ears are shot. So just because you have hearing aids, that again is not a disqualifier, but that's a case-by-case basis.
Somebody wants to know, let's see here, how long do they have? Can they do the course without having a boating experience?
Okay, so the question is, how long can I take the course without having the boating experience? Once you begin our program, you have a year to complete the course. Once you complete the course, you have an additional year to meet the requirements of the Coast Guard. So depending on whether you're on the East Coast or down in Florida or where you are, I sailed around the world, and I couldn't claim 360 days, and it took me 2.5 years to do that. And I wasn't out there every single day, although I was on the water every day. So generally speaking, I would recommend that you have at very least half the amount of time necessary to get the license that you want. So when you're in the 220s, 250s, you're getting close to the time that you need, depending on where you are and what your work schedule is and whether you've got time to spend on the boat. I would just plan appropriately. But again, once you begin the course, you have a year to complete it. Once you complete that course, you have an additional year to meet the requirements. So it's not unusual at all for somebody to start the program long before they have the necessary time.
And last one, how far back can they go for documenting boating experience?
Sure, that's a good question. So the question is, how far back can we go to documenting our boating experience? You can go back as far as your 16th birthday. Right, but let's say that it was done on your dad's boat or your mom's boat, and they're passed or they're no longer with us. That time's not going to count. You're going to need somebody to fill out a sea service form who, so I'm 65. I lived on the water. I was a mate on a charter boat at 15 years old. But getting that time qualified would be nearly impossible. So you can go back to your 16th birthday. The older you are, the more difficult that's going to be. But it's not uncommon for children of parents who the dad or mom wants to sign off their time. They can start signing off that time for their kids starting when they turn 16 years old. Those are the questions that we got on this. We got one more section, maybe another 10 minutes or so, but this is important stuff. We'll talk about studying for the exam. So let's just talk about the topics that'll be covered on the exam itself. For the 6-pack, the exam is broken down into 4 modules: the rules of road, deck general and deck safety, which is kind of like weather, knot tying, emergency procedures. Navigation general is understanding how to read a chart, understanding aids to navigation, things along those lines. And then what they call piloting navigation is chart plotting, the physical ability of determining a course, determining the time it took you to get from point A to point B, the direction that you need to steer, and things like that. Those are the 4 topics that you'll be learning within the 6-pack program. In the 6-pack program, we also teach you, so there's something called CFRs, the Code of Federal Regulations. Code of Federal Regulations, whether you realize it or not, dictates almost everything that we do in life. It certainly dictates the industry in which we're in. In the 6-pack course, we teach you those rules and regulations. In the master's program, we teach you how to use the CFRs, the Code of Federal Regulations, to look those requirements up. The CFRs, the Code of Federal Regulations, is a governmental document that doesn't have the normal navigation tools that you would expect if you pick up any other book. So using CFRs, it's a little bit tricky. Once you're taught how to do it and you've learned the process, it's not difficult. But for the average person to pick up a copy of the CFRs and try to look up a rule or regulation, it's a trick and a half. So the 6-pack, we focus on the masters. We focus on the rules and regulations, and those are the 4 sections: the rules, the deck general and safety, navigation general, and piloting and chart plotting. That's the core of it. The masters will build off of that. We'll go a little bit deeper into firefighting, and we'll talk a little deeper about deck general and deck safety. But there's no additional material on rules of road or chart plotting. That's all taken care of within the six-pack program itself. On the six-pack, the minimum score requirements for chart plotting, there's a total of 10 questions. You're required to get a 90% to pass. So out of those 10 chart plotting questions, you can miss one. The navigation general, there's 50 questions. You need to get a 70%, so you can miss 15. On the deck general and deck safety, there's 50 questions. Again, it's a 70% minimum score for passing. That's 15 wrong. On the rules of road, there's a total of 50 questions. You need to get a 90, or you can miss 5. And then on the upgrade to masters, there's 70 questions. You would need to miss no more than 21 questions. So those are the minimum scores. With mariners, we're really focusing on teaching the understanding, not the memorization piece. That's not to say that within the rules of road there isn't some memorization, but we're really trying to teach you the hows and whys and not just the becauses. As I said before, we're not charging a fee for the exam, so it's in our best interest to make sure that you're well prepared. The way the testing goes is each one of those modules is separate. So with our online testing, once you're ready to take the exam and you've passed all the course material, you sign up for whenever you want to take the test. Again, it doesn't matter to us whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's on your schedule. There's no limitations to that whatsoever. Now it's broken down into 4 sections. Each one of those sections is an individual test. So I can take all those 4 parts for the 6-pack on one day, or once I start the testing process, it needs to be completed within 5 business days. So I could do rules of road on one day, chart plotting on another day, navigation general, and deck safety on separate days as well. So you can break it out. Some want to do it all in one day. Some people just want to do one section at a time. You're going to start with the chart plotting section if you go through us. When you complete the chart plotting section, we're going to send you out you'll have a new chart for chart plotting. You won't use your existing your practice chart. We'll give you a testing package that will have everything that you need to complete it. If I were to take my rules of road exam, I have 3 shots at each one of the modules. If I failed any one of these, let's say that I didn't pass chart plotting on my first attempt, the 3 that I passed go in the bank. I only retest the section that I missed, and there's no additional fees for it. That's all part of the program. If I were to fail any one section 3 times, we will reset the program. You have to wait 45 days, and you get to go through the whole process again, as long as it's within the 1-year period of your purchase. And again, there's no additional fees for that. As long as you follow our process and procedures and lean on us when you need to, you don't understand something, you should expect to get through this. The people who have the most difficult time passing are the ones that I consider to be cowboys, people who think that they know this stuff better than me, or they think they know this better than anyone else out there. Those people I don't do it this way, or I'm only on a lake, I don't know why you're asking me how to use a chart. In my backyard, I can see the other side of the land, I don't know why I need to use a compass. The Coast Guard doesn't care about that because the license is issued for the United States and its possessions. So if I've got my 6-pack, even though I might have experience on a smaller lake, if I have an inland license, I can use that on any inland waters, regardless of where your boating experience is. So the test questions, or the testing portion, is the minimum requirements the Coast Guard feels that the holder of a license needs to be able to know. And that's what we focus on. So as long as you follow the process and procedures, our expectation is that you're going to pass this. And in fact, part of our programs is we do offer a pass guarantee. We believe in it so much. That's why we'll reset the program and give you 3 more shots without any additional charges. It doesn't happen very often, but it is an option if you were to go through this and not get through. As I was saying earlier, our teaching philosophy is we really do want you to understand the hows and whys between the material, and not just the becauses. That goes back to my story earlier of just being taught the answers. For me, if you teach me just an answer, it's very difficult for me to maintain that knowledge. But if you teach me the hows and whys, I'll almost never forget it. Also, with the way that our courses are built, we recognize that not everybody learns the same way. So we have a series of tools that are available to all of our students, and you can use some of the additional resources to lean on to help you understand better. So we, in all of our courses, there is a visual lecture that you can read. There is also an audio component where it's professionally produced, where you can listen to that lecture while you're reading it. And you can also download that audio so that you can be in your car, or you can be on your smartphone, and you can be listening to the lectures. And we also use videos so that you get the opportunity of viewing these things. So we use a lot of different tools to teach the materials. In addition to the course and those tools, there are also ebooks that are available that are downloadable and printable. And they can also be used on your smartphones or any other portable devices as well. Built within the class is the 6-pack and the masters is our electronic flashcards. These are open-ended questions that will make sure that you understand particular topics. For instance, if we use a question on the rules of road that says, when must I post a proper lookout? And a very common answer is at all times. That's what the rules of road say. That's a very common question. If you do a search out there, you'll find that question. However, there's more than one version of that question. So if you just memorize at all times, and I serve up a multiple choice question and at all times isn't available, but one of the responses is never. Another response is when I feel like it. Another one might be the Coast Guard doesn't require me to post a lookout, or another response might be from sunset to sunrise and in inclement weather. That would be a correct answer. So we use these flashcards not only to make sure that you would have answered that question with at all times, but you understand that there's more than one answer than just at all times. Again, we want you to understand the material, but we also don't want you to get tripped up on something pretty simple when you get into the test. So we have, with our program, we have licensed instructors who are available throughout your course. They're not sitting there waiting for your call. We're on the East Coast. Our office hours are from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. We offer a series of different courses. So that requires us to have multiple instructors who are experts on different topics. Depending on the question that you provide for us, we will be sending you one of multiple instructors, the one who's best to support that particular question. So we have a ticket system that you'll be able to put in a ticket, give us your phone number, and we'll have your instructor call you. In most cases, it's within an hour or two of us getting your request. That's not the case, and sometimes it's faster. We also, because it's an online program, we're the only school in the industry that I'm aware that does this. We also offer 24/7 live technical support. So this is a support team that if you have an issue with connecting to our course, if you're taking an exam and your audio is not working, or if you have your online course isn't working as you would expect it to, or you're not logging in, or any multiple things, we have a technical support team that's available 24/7. And what makes them unique is that the person who answered the telephone is trained to be able to solve your technical issue. So it's not let me ask you a bunch of questions and let me hand this off to you. We expect that technical issue to be dealt with almost immediately. It's very rare that we can't fix these things immediately. We recommend that you manage your time efficiently and effectively. Have a goal. Because it's online, you can study at your own pace. For me, I personally can't do much more than a half an hour, 45 minutes. I know other people can sit there for 8 hours a day. It really depends on what your learning style is. So figure out what pace works for you, come up with a plan. And, unlike sitting in a classroom, so sitting in a classroom, one, you're listening to an instructor read from a book. Two, that instructor is on a schedule. If you don't get something, there's no way of going back over that information. They got to keep moving forward. By doing it online, if you don't get it, you can listen to that lecture again. You can watch that training video again. You can read that ebook again. You can reach out to our licensed instructors with a question that's specific to you so that our instructor can address it. I truly believe that doing it online is much more effective than sitting in a classroom and listening to somebody read from a book. So some of the benefits of online testing is the flexibility, the cost effectiveness for us and for you. You're not traveling, you're not paying for a hotel. So when we used pre-COVID, there were weekends we could be running 70 or 80 tests all around the country. The test would only come up once a quarter or once a month or whatever. If you were to miss a section in one of those tests, you'd have to wait till we came back again, or you'd have to drive to a test that was in faraway lands. It's very convenient because it's at your time schedule. Again, if you work at night, you can take the test during the day. If you work during the day, you can take the test at night. You want to take it on a weekend or however that works. Because you're not sitting and taking one exam in a 4-hour period of time, you get 3 hours for each one of the sections. You can take one test on Monday, another test on Tuesday, another test on Wednesday, and finish them up over a 4-day period of time. And then the process is very comprehensive. It works. Literally, we've run tens of thousands of exams online. We've got this dialed in, and it works really, really well for us. Now, once you complete the exam, what will happen is the exam, we will record it. We have live proctors who will review the information. As long as you pass the test and everything is appropriate, we're going to send you your certificate of completion. If there's a case where perhaps you weren't listening, or you were talking to somebody, or there were some other issues, that may delay. Generally, we're turning the exams around in 3 to 5 business days. When you're online, there's no searching the internet. We're going to give you something called a lockdown browser that's going to prevent you from getting outside. As I said, you're going to need a webcam with a microphone. We are going to ask you to show us a 360-degree view of your area. That way we know that there's not somebody sitting in front of you, or that you don't have a bunch of notes up on a wall with answers. You're going to want to make sure that you show us what's in front of your laptop or your desktop computer. There is no testing on a smartphone or an iPad. You can use those for the learning process, and you can take the quizzes and what we call module exams using those devices. But when it comes down to the final proctored exam, the Coast Guard requires that it's either done on a desktop or a laptop, and there's no exceptions to that. Any additional questions?
We have quite a few.
Quite a few. Okay, so I'll keep them as quick as I can for everybody.
If they're a part of a charity, and they're donating the time, do they still need a captain's license?
Yeah. So the question is, if I'm part of a charity and I'm donating the time on my boat, do I need to have a captain's license to run it? And I'm going to say yes. And I'm going to tell a quick story. There may be exceptions to this, but for this as a general question, my answer is going to be yes. A number of years ago, I donated my time. I used to do it a lot, and I was donating time to a church. And this church was a community church, and their heart was in the right place. And they were teaching sailing courses to youngsters, less than 10 years old, 10, 11, 12-year-old kids who were coming to their Bible study courses. And I talked to the head honcho of the church, and I asked him, I said, so the person on that boat with those kids, do they have a captain's license? No, we don't need a license because we're not charging a fee for it. And I said, look, can anyone from the neighborhood walk on that boat? He said, no, it's only for the members of our church. So in the Coast Guard's eyes, that is for consideration. So I told him, I said, look, I wouldn't run that. I wouldn't run those charters if I was you. And he's like, oh, I know you're just trying to sell us a course. Like, honestly, you couldn't buy a course from me. Number one, I'm not trying to make money off this. I'm just telling you that I strongly suspect that you're in violation of what the Coast Guard would see as the requirements. A couple years later, I saw the head of the church at a pizza parlor, and he came up to me and he said, "Bob, I wish I had listened to you." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "That summer they were out teaching children how to sail, and one of the fun things about learning how to sail on smaller boats is tipping them over and learning how to right them. That's kind of what you do." And he had a little girl who was on the boat, and they did this, and the mom found out that she was in the water swimming. She had life jackets on and all that other stuff, but the mom took exception to this and took the guy to court, and he was fined $100,000 for running a sailing school without licensed captains on board the boat. So if the person is on the boat teaching, or that person is running the boat on the boat, then you need to be a licensed captain. If you've ever seen the sailing schools where you'll see the kids on a boat and you'll see somebody with a megaphone on a dinghy or an inflatable yelling at them or screaming at them or give them directions, in that particular case, you do not need to have a captain's license. But if the person is on board that boat, you need to have a captain's license in most cases. And again, there's some exceptions, but we don't have time for all those exceptions right now.
This person wants to do commercial fishing and wants to go past 100 miles.
So if you're going to do commercial fishing and you want to go outside of 100 miles, then you're going to need to get a master's level license, because that's good for 200 miles offshore. So that's the Coast Guard's world for that.
If they get a towing endorsement, can they have more than 6 people on the boat if it's only attached to a 6-pack license?
Yeah, so the question is, if I have a towing endorsement and I'm going out there and saving people, can I have more than 6 paying passengers on the boat? So most of those boats, the answer is, if somebody's going to die, yes. But most of those boats are more than 26 foot. So Towboat US and Boat US, most of those boats are greater than 26 feet. And most of those captains have a master's level license. So the restrictions of people is not such an issue in a commercial environment. If I were doing it on a recreational boat, I had my towing endorsement and I was charging a fee, and I came up on a boat that needed assistance, there's more than 6 people on that boat, I would call the Coast Guard and tell them I'm assisting a boat, I need some additional assistance. So I personally wouldn't put more than 6 paying passengers on the boat, regardless of the situation. If it was life or death, I put them on the boat, I call the Coast Guard and tell them I need some additional assistance.
Somebody wants to know if they had a felony conviction, will it impact their ability to get captain's license?
So good question. So the question is, if I had a felony conviction, will that prevent me from getting my captain's license? The answer is that depends. So the Coast Guard is going to ask you whether you've ever been convicted of a felony. If you have, tell them yes, because they're gonna find the answer. So here's an area where I had a father and son who took one of our courses, and the father had a felony, and he said no. And the Coast Guard didn't give him his license. And he called me up and he said, "Bob, do you have any hooks? Can you get in? Can you fix this problem for me?" And I don't, and I can't. But I said, "So what happened?" He said, when he was younger, he had a drug charge, and the judge said and it was a felony, he said, the judge said that if he didn't get in trouble for 3 years, they would expunge his record. So when he saw this question, he answered the question, no. The Coast Guard didn't ask whether your record was expunged, they asked whether it ever occurred. So he wasn't delayed on getting his license because he had a felony conviction. He was delayed in getting his license because he wasn't honest with answering the question. So the Coast Guard, as I alluded to before, the CFR is the Code of Federal Regulations. There are specific guidelines on convictions and the period of time that you have to go without any further issues. So let's say that I was, when I was younger, I'm 65 now. When I was younger, let's say that I got busted for a DUI, DWI, whatever they're calling them now. And it was a one-time event. And the Coast Guard asked whether they occurred. And I said, yeah, when I was 18 years old, I got busted for driving underneath the influence. But it hasn't happened since. That's not going to prevent me from getting my license. But if I got a DUI when I was 18 and another one when I was 28 and another one when I was 38, now that's a problem, because the Coast Guard is going to look at that and say, well, there's a pattern here.
You can keep moving on.
Okay. So the last thing that we're going to do, I guess all the questions are answered.
Oh, they're not answered. But
oh, well, let's get this out there, and then anyone else who has questions, I just want to make sure I'm not holding people unnecessarily. So anyone who is on this call for the 6-pack or the master's license, we're going to offer $250 off the 6-pack or a master's online course and exam. The code is WEB250 CAPT CAPT. We're going to send you an email follow-up just so that you have that information. That'll save you $250 on either the 6-pack course or the master's online course, and that's money right off the top. With our courses also, there's no taxes because these are considered to be educational programs, and we don't charge a fee for shipping. We also offer additional study materials. As I said, you've got ebooks you can download and print. Some people like the hard copy materials. You'll get an option that you can save an extra 20% on the hard copy materials. And finally, whether you take our course or take somebody else's course, you're going to need a set of chart plotting tools. We also offer those as an option at a discount. If you have your own set, that's great. If you've got a friend that you can borrow a set from, that's equally good. So that's our contact information. And again, we'll provide that to you, and you already have it. Is our phone number is 609-303-0664, marinerslearningsystem.com. And if you have any customer service questions, that's our email address. Anyone who wants to stick around, I'm not bailing. I just want to make sure that anyone who had to go, it's been an hour 20. That's about what I would have expected. I want to make sure I answer all these questions, so I'm going to keep going.
How does the renewal process work? How does somebody keep their license current?
Good question. So the question is, how does the license renewal process work? So once you have your license, it's good for 5 years. To renew your license, there's 2 different options. One, to renew your license, the Coast Guard requires that you have a minimum of 360 days on the water since that license was issued. Now, in a 5-year period of time, if you're a mom or a dad or you've got a full-time job, 360 days is a lot of time on the water in a 5-year period of time. So for those people who do not have that time on the water, we offer something that's called a deck license renewal course. And by taking this course and passing it, we'll give you a certificate of completion that the Coast Guard will accept in lieu of the time on the water. Now with the license renewal, you're going to go through the licensing process again, the application process again. You will not need to do the CPR First Aid again. And today, which may change tomorrow, but at least today when I'm speaking to you, if you got your TWIC card issued once, it doesn't need to be an active live TWIC card. It's still valid. So those are the requirements of renewing your license. Every 5 years, you have to renew your license. If you have 360 days on the water, it's basically paperwork and an application fee. And if you don't have the time on the water, we have something that's called a deck license renewal course. You can take that, and the Coast Guard will accept that in lieu of the time on the water.
Let's see here. Somebody wants to know the cost comparison between the 6-pack and the Masters.
Okay, so there's a question. What's the cost difference between the 6-pack and the Masters? It's about $200. We're at, what's our price for the 6-pack? $695, and the Masters is $895. I'm not too forward facing with some of the stuff. So the 6-pack is $695, the normal price. The Masters is $895. I always try to recommend people, when you're making the decision, go for the license that is the highest one that you can qualify for. In my own case, I was retired. I got my license for very personal reasons. I never thought I'd use it professionally. I ran into a guy sitting at a bar, and he said, "Bob, get the highest level license that you could." I did so. I got my master's level license at another bar in Annapolis, Maryland. I don't have a drinking problem, just was where a lot of business was conducted. And I ran into a couple that just bought a boat, was in Miami. They wanted to have that boat brought up to Annapolis and then to show their family for Thanksgiving, then brought back down to Florida and then into the Caribbean. Within my first week of my license, I had my first job. Within my first year, I made $110,000. Now, the interesting thing is, although I wasn't required by the Coast Guard to have a license to move this boat, the insurance company would not have insured me if I did not have a master's level license. So that was a really good situation where, and literally I have a master's license with a towing and sailing endorsement. I've been licensed for 22, 23 years now, maybe 24 years, something like that. I've never once used the license that I carry. However, my business card says USCG licensed master. When I'm in competitive environments, I know I'm carrying the highest level license that I can. So getting a master's license was, for me, the smartest thing that I could have possibly done. Now, if you're not a U.S. citizen, you have a green card, those would be reasons. And remember, with when I was talking about the master's licenses earlier, to get a six-pack, you need a minimum of 360 days worth of boating experience. 90 of those days need to be within the last 3 years. To get a inland master's license, you need a minimum of 360 days on the water. 90 of those days need to be in the last 3 years. So for an inland master's and a six-pack is the same amount of time on the water. So if you qualify for time on a six-pack, you qualify it for on a master's. Now, the six-pack near coastal license, you needed 90 days in the ocean outside what they call the boundary lines. Basically, as a general statement, if you are outside an inlet in the Atlantic or the Pacific, that's considered to be outside the boundary lines. You need 90 of those days if you want that near coastal license. For a near coastal master's license, you need a total of 720 days. 360 of those need to be in the ocean. That's a lot of time to be in the ocean. So there is something that is called a dual purpose license, which is the license that most of our master license captains get, which if I can show the Coast Guard a minimum of 360 days on the water and 90 of those days were in the ocean, the Coast Guard is going to issue, and I take the master's level course, the Coast Guard is going to issue a inland master with an OUPV near coastal endorsement. So what that means to you is that I'm a licensed master and I can still take six-pack charters up to 100 miles offshore. So it's like the best of both worlds. And if I do gain that additional experience in the ocean, I can upgrade my inland masters to a near coastal masters. So for me, and again, it's not taking a special course. If you take our master's course and you have 360 days worth of boating experience and 90 of those are in the ocean, you're going to get that dual purpose license if you request it during your application.
Somebody wants to know, is it required to get a captain's license if they're only interested in moving boats for hire?
Yeah, so the question is, am I required to have a captain's license if I'm only going to be moving boats for hire? So as long as you're the only one on the boat and you don't have crew, and the owners of the boat aren't on that boat, you would not necessarily be required to have a license. But I will tell you that the insurance company will not insure you to move that boat. And I personally wouldn't move anyone's boat without insurance on it. Now, the interesting thing about insurance is you cannot purchase insurance to run somebody else's boat. They have to put you on their boat, on their license. It's called a rider. And it's cheap. It costs $25 or $30. But when I do deliveries, and if I'm on somebody else's insurance, I don't ask them, did you put me on your insurance policy? Because I'm pretty sure they're going to lie. I want to actually have that piece of paper in my pocket. So if I show up and I'll tell somebody, look, you're going to have to put me on as a rider on your insurance policy so that when I'm running your boat, I'm covered. If something were to go wrong, if I show up on the dock to take that boat and they don't have that paperwork, I'm not leaving the dock until I have either an email from their insurance company or I've got that paper in my pocket. Too many times people have said, yeah, you're covered, and you're really not. So the Coast Guard may not require that you have a license to do boat deliveries, but the insurance companies will for sure not be looking to insure you if you don't have your license.
Let's see. Somebody wants to know if they have a stint in their heart.
Okay, so the question is, if I have a stint in my heart, will that restrict me from getting my captain's license? The fact that you had a stint is not a reason not to be licensed. Again, you're going to have to get a letter from your cardiologist saying that everything's cool, that this condition will not prevent you from running a vessel commercially. You're going to need to have a period of 18 months where nobody has messed with your heart. And depending on what other medical conditions you have, or what your cardiologist had said, they may require that you take a stress test. But having a stent is not a reason not to get a license.
What about pacemaker?
Same thing with pacemakers. So again, as long as you're stable, I started this off with, I literally knew somebody who had a heart replacement. So with the heart, a pacemaker, and I don't pretend to be a doctor, and I'm speaking very generally. I don't know your particular issues. I don't know any other complications. I don't know. So if you've got a pacemaker, but you're also a diabetic, and you might have some other type of conditions, those are all things that the Coast Guard's going to look at. They want to make sure you literally have the souls of other people's lives in your hands, and they want to make sure that there's not a medical condition that's going to prevent you from being able to operate safely. But a pacemaker, again, by itself is not a reason that you cannot be licensed.
How does somebody upgrade from an OUPV that they already have to a master's?
So another good question. So the question is, if I have my 6-pack license, how do I upgrade to a master's level license? We offer a Coast Guard approved program that is called the OUPV Upgrade to Masters. So by taking this program, we'll provide you with a certificate of completion. You submit that with the upgrade paperwork that we'll provide for you to the Coast Guard, and they will upgrade your license from a 6-pack to a master's level license.
Let's see. Somebody asked what they can expect on our final exam.
So the question is, what can you expect on our final exam? And I would say no surprises. It would be my answer. If you followed our process and procedure, if you use the tools that we provide, and lean on us when you have specific questions, there will not be any surprises come test day. If you're that cowboy who ignored all of the advice that we gave and didn't use the program the way that it's intended, come test day, it's going to be a lot more difficult for you. Again, we're really trying to focus on, and the way that we teach is we use a building block approach. We believe you have to crawl before you walk, and you have to walk before you run. So in our online course, when say rules of road, there's a series of different lectures. You have to pass each lecture before you can move on to the next one, because it's a building block approach. Before you can move on from any lecture, there's going to be a quiz that's specific to that material that we just taught you. We require that you pass that with a 90%. You can take it as many times as you want. If you get something wrong, we'll even tell you where to get the information for the right answer, and you can go back and review any questions and any tests that you've got wrong. That's all built in the program. So we will test you or quiz you on the lectures, and then when you finish a module, there's a module exam. Again, you can take that module exam as many times as you want, but it's a pretty general indicator of the type of questions that you would expect on your final exam. So if we teach weather, because weather is kind of like walking, if you're going to be a boat captain, you need to know you need to know certain things about the weather. However, in the real world, if you are a weather person on TV, and if you were right 50% of the time, you'd be a super genius. So there's lots of things that we teach, but if you don't see any questions and you don't see any emphasis on particular areas, like clouds, there's a whole bunch of different clouds. We're all sorts of different levels that these clouds are at. They're all made of all different things, but there's 1 or 2 clouds that if you see, that means a storm's a brewing. We might spend a little bit more time on that. That might be a sign that this might be something that's kind of important to me.
What is the job market for people with a 6-pack license?
So what's the job market? If you're good, it's good. It's like anything. Just because you have a license doesn't mean that there's going to be people knocking down your door. But if you show up, and so I think if I'm looking for a 6-pack opportunity, going to a charter boat captain or somebody who's saying, look, I'd like to work as a mate on your boat for a weekend for free. Well, I'm going to do that for a couple reasons. One, if somebody comes to me and says that they're willing to work for me for 3 days and not charge me a fee, number one, I'm going to pay them. But the fact that they said that shows me that there's some sort of interest here, and I'm interested in this person. And secondly, if it's me and I'm working as a mate on their boat, I want to see how this guy's boat is run. And so it gives me an insight until I'm making a long-term commitment to them as well. So I believe that the market is very good for a six-pack. I think it's better for a master's level license just because that's the highest license that you can get. But again, there's nothing wrong with the six-pack license. Don't hear me saying something I don't intend to say.
What tonnage of vessels is required to get a 25-ton master's?
Okay, so the question is, what size vessel am I required to operate to get a 25-ton master's? If you've got experience, so with all of our students, the average size boat is a 24-foot center console, 55-year-old plus person. That's our average student. If you've got experience on a 15-foot boat with a 10 horsepower engine and you can meet all the time requirements, the Coast Guard's going to issue a 25-ton master's. And a 25-ton master's could be a 30 or 40 or larger boat, depending on how it's built. But generally speaking, if you got experience on a boat that's going to qualify for a six-pack, that same vessel will qualify you for a 25-ton master's level license.
Let's see. Somebody wants to, or a few people actually want to know. They actually bought courses from us that they did not take the exams.
Okay.
But they expired or they're coming up on the expiration.
Okay.
Is there a way that they can extend them?
Sure. So the question is, you previously purchased a program from us in the past. For various reasons, you didn't complete the program and you didn't take the final exam, but you're outside your 1 year period. What can you do? So we have a solution that for $125 will reset your program and give you access to the course for an additional year. So that's how we help with that. And if your course expired 5 years ago or expired 5 days ago, it's the same program. So it does not need to be consecutively. As long as you did not take the final exam, then that option is there. If you did take the final exam and perhaps didn't submit the paperwork to the Coast Guard on time, if that's the situation that you're in, you're going to have to take the whole course again. But we would offer a 50% discount as a courtesy. So if you didn't complete the course and didn't take the final exam and you're past your 1 year period of time, it's $125 for us to reset and give you an additional year's access to the program. If you did take the course and you did take the final exam, then you've completed that program, but you didn't submit your paperwork or for whatever reason you didn't finish up with the license, we will offer you a 50% discount of whatever license, whatever course you took or you purchased, we'll offer you 50% off a replacement.
Somebody wants to know military time. Does that count?
Okay, so we're going to take one or two more of these questions. This one's on military time. So military time can count, but it really depends on what your duties were. So for instance, I served in the Navy. I was on the aircraft carrier, the Midway. At that time, it was the foremost vessel that was out at sea all the time. We were never in for more than 10 days ever. But I was I worked on the flight deck on jets, so I was what they called an Airedale, and I wasn't part of ship's company, and none of my time counted. Now, if I had been a boatswain's mate, or I was servicing, or if I was serving navigational watches, or as part of ship's company, that time may have counted. If I was part of the engineering department below decks, that time is not going to count. If I was part of the deck department, depending on my responsibilities on the boat, that time may count. The big kicker with the military time is that regardless of what your responsibilities were, if that time does qualify, the Coast Guard's going to only accept 60% of that time out on that you were out on the water. So if you were a boatswain's mate and you were out on the water for 100 days, the Coast Guard's only going to recognize 60 of those days.
When does the discount code end?
So the discount code is going to end Sunday night at midnight.
We have a few more questions. Do you want me
to two or three more, and I just don't want to keep people any longer. I'm cool on the time. We'll go to quarter of, and then we'll say our goodbyes around there.
Let's see. When they get the physical done, is there a form that they're filling out, or?
Yeah, so the question is, when I get my physical, is there a form that I need to fill out? Yes, there is. It's a multi-page form. We'll provide that form for you. You can also, if you go through our program, the MMCs, that form will be something that you can download and print for the doctor as well. But yes, there's a form that the doctor is going to have to sign off on.
How does somebody gain boating experience if they don't have their own boat?
So the question is, how do I gain boating experience if I don't have my own boat? Going back to what I said before, go look for a charter boat captain who might be looking for a mate. Go look at the dinner cruises if there's any in your area. Go look for other commercial opportunities, or if you're a sailor, there's always job boards for people who are looking to move boats. One of the most difficult things for me when I was moving boats was to find crew. And I had a lot of people who were looking for boating experience that I was able to, they had to find their way to the boat and they had to find their way home from the boat. But I was able to take them out on trips that they would never get experience on. And as I progressed in my experience, boats larger than what they would ever get experience on as well. So those are a couple of different ways of doing that. Another way, and again, these are just, I'm not supporting this company, but Freedom Boat Club, there's plenty of clubs out there that will allow you, and there you go. There's Freedom Boat Club or other clubs that you don't have to own the boat. You pay a monthly fee or a yearly fee, and they'll give you access to their boats. That's another great way of getting experience if you don't have the time on the water or if you don't own your own boat.
For the final exam, can they use an iPad or does it need to be a laptop or desktop?
Yeah, for the final exam, the Coast Guard requires, so the online final, the question is, can I use a iPad for the final exam? The Coast Guard requires for our final exam to be administered online, that is either done on a laptop or a desktop computer. We use special software that tracks your eye movements and make sure that you stay in front of the computer and things like this. If you're on an iPad, it's going to be moving, and some of the AI instruments that we use to make sure that you're not cheating are thwarted by an iPad, and it would give us inaccurate results indicating that you were cheating when you weren't. So for those reasons, there are others, but for those reasons, for the final exam, you're required to do it on a desktop or a laptop.
How does somebody count their sea service time if they were going between inland and offshore during a day at a time?
Sure. So the question is, if I started on inland waters and I finished on offshore waters, how do I claim that time? So the Coast Guard, when you fill out that small vessel sea service form, they're going to ask you where you were. And if you're on inland waters, you were on inland waters. If you're on near coastal waters, you were on near coastal waters. So if I start on inland waters and I took a trip and it was a 7-hour trip, and for those hours I was out in the ocean, I would be claiming that time out. I would say that that's a near coastal license.
Somebody's blind in one eye. Their vision is good with corrective lenses. Will that cause an issue with licensing?
Yeah. So the question is, I'm blind in one eye, but I can see the other one's healthy. So if it's not a degenerative disease, so let's say that I got shot in the eye with a BB gun, and I lost that eye, that is not a reason for me to not be qualified to get my captain's license. So that loss of an eye is not an automatic disqualifier. However, if it was a degenerative disease where I had a disease in this one eye, and that's why I lost it, the Coast Guard would be concerned that that would continue on into your healthy eye. So if it was from a degenerative type of disease, that would be a restriction that you may be able to work through depending on your optometrist and your medical records. But the fact that you lost an eye, as long as your other eye is healthy, that is not a disqualifier on its own.
We're pretty narrowed down now to only a handful more questions.
Okay, we only got a couple more, so we're going to stick through it.
Let's see. This person worked on a boat during the winter, engine work, updating a chart plotter, various mechanical jobs. Would that count?
Yeah, so the question is, I worked on a boat. This question was in the winter. I was working on the chart plotter, things like this. So for time to count, does this time count? For time on the water to count, you have to be off the dock and you can't be on an anchor. and you cannot be attached to land with a line. So you have to be what they consider to be underway. You don't have to have the engines on, but you got to be off the docks and at very least drifting, and you've got to be out there for 4 hours. So if you're in a maintenance mode and you're installing a radar and you're on land, that doesn't count. But if you are taking an owner out and teaching them how to use the radar and electronics and GPS, and you're out there for 4 hours, that can count as a day.
Let's see. I am in the course to learn how to captain my own boat, which I don't have yet, not for commercial purposes. Can I still get the 6-pack?
Yeah, so the question is, I want to take, or I'm in the course for my own boat, but I don't own the boat. Can I still get the license? If you've got the sea service time, that's fine. If you've got the boating experience, that's fine. If you have no boating experience, you can complete the course. You're going to get a great education. You're going to get a certificate of completion, but the Coast Guard will not issue the license without the time on the water.
This person is in Puerto Rico. They travel often to the U.S. Virgin Islands and to the other Virgin Islands.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Would captain's license allow him to go in both of those waters?
Okay, so the question is, I'm in Puerto Rico, and from Puerto Rico, I travel to both the British Virgin Islands, the BVI, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Will my license work for me? So I can start a trip in Puerto Rico if my boat is fast enough and I can travel this distance, and I can go into the BVI, but the trip can't end in the BVI. So if I brought 6 people from Puerto Rico, I've got to end up in Puerto Rico with those same 6 people. Somebody gets off the boat, then I just illegally traffic people into another country. That's a problem. And Puerto Rico is recognized in this particular case. A U.S. license works in Puerto Rico. So going between Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands, there's no issues whatsoever. In fact, just a little known note on the U.S. Virgin Islands, USVI, if I have a 6-pack license and I work with the USVI, there is some additional courses that I can take for safety at sea stuff that the USVI will recognize and allow me to have 12 passengers on a 6-pack boat. It's only in the United States Virgin Islands. It's an exception to the rule, but if you are operating there, it's worthy of speaking to the USVI and seeing what those requirements are, because you could literally be on a 6-pack boat with a 6-pack license, and the USVI will allow you to be a 12 boat, what they would call a 12-pack operator.
Let's see here. I think we are pretty much good.
All right, so that sounds like we've answered all the questions. I really appreciate everybody hanging in there. I hope that this was informative. If you haven't taken a course, we'd love to see you come along. But if you have any additional questions or there's any way that we can help you, yeah, for sure, I'd like you to take our course and all those other things. But my goal truly was just to provide good information so that you can make an intelligent decision as to what would work best for you. However we can help with that process, we're happy to be there. Again, I appreciate the opportunity, and we're here to lean on if you need any additional information. Thank you so much. Be well.